Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Dom selectors. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to cover a lot of selectors today. At least we're going to try to cover all of them in one class. So we're going to have get elements by tag name, get elements by the class name, get elements by ID, and all of these things. Okay, now first things first, I want to show you how you can follow me. Now, let me just minimize this one. In your JavaScript DOM, copy the starter file, just put it somewhere in the desktop. I'm just gonna copy it, or you can move it, doesn't matter. So I'm gonna put it there, and here you go. Now what I can do, I'm just gonna close everything here, and let me close this one as well, so I can open up a new folder. So choose the starter file, here it is, that you put on your desktop. That's it. Now, inside we have assets folder where we have the styles.css, and we have the first lecture we're going to do today in the index.html. Now, if you look at the index.html, I already have linked the file that we're going to work on, right? So go live or right click, open with live server, and it should give me that one. I'm just going to close the old one. Okay, so this is our to-do list. And we're gonna work on this, and we are gonna use some of the DOM selectors here to manipulate the DOM, right? To manipulate these elements that we can find in the index file. Okay, now in index.html, I do have the title. This is the div that contains h2 class, which will be the title. And I also have a class header. Then I have the input, where we're gonna input things later on. And then I have the add button, which is this one here. And now, then I have one unordered list. Inside I have 2, 4, 6 list elements, and they all have same class called element. And one of them is having also another class called checked. That's why it's here like this one. Okay, now that I have a footer, which is not styled, and I'm linking to the DOM lecture. Okay, that was just the quick info, what you need to get, right? So let's do a couple of things here. Let's start with using this selector called tag name. So document.get elements by the tag name. Now, what does a tag means? Well, any HTML tag means this div, h2, input, span, that is called a tag. So we can get that through these selectors. So the first one, let's do it like this. And let's say console.log document.get element get elements by tag name, right? So we're gonna use the first one. Now inside we need to, in the curly brackets, not in the curly brackets, in these brackets, we need to say what type of tag we need from here. Okay, for the first one, I just want to grab the h2 tag. Let's put it here, h2, and that should be in quotes, single or double, doesn't matter, right? We're just targeting this h2 tag. Okay, now in order to see this, we need to do inspect and go to the console. Very good. I do have one HTML collection. And if I hover it like this, it's already selecting the h2 title, right? Okay. Okay, now let's move to another selector. And this selector will not be choosing or selecting the DOM elements by the tag name, but we can use by their class name. So I'm just going to copy this one, and I'm going to say 2 here. And I'm gonna go up here, and I'm gonna grab the description. We should have done the same thing for the first one, all right? And let's do that. Very good. And instead of saying elements by tag name, we need to say element by class name. And the class name is, by the way, this class, whatever class we want to target. So I just want to target the span elements with the class called close. Very good. Save it. Now I do have HTML collection of 6. I do have 6 list elements that contain that class, close. Okay. Now, if I want to select only one of them, for example, the first one, well, same as an erase, we can pass the index there, and there you go. Now, if you hover on the close, and it will select which one I'm talking about. I'm talking about this first here. Very good. And this is called plural, get elements. It's not one element, it's elements. All of the instances here that it will find, it will grab it. Okay, very good. Now, move to the third one. And the third one is get element by the ID. Now, we need to find where we have the ID. Well, we do have it here, right? So my unordered list. So grab that one. Just gonna copy this one just to save time. Get element by ID. So you see the difference here. Let me just my UL here like this. Save it. So get element by ID is very different to get elements. Now, why is this get element by ID? Well, the ID by default, they should be unique here. I don't want to create another here div. For example, another, oops. Come on. I don't want to get what I'm doing here. Doing something wrong. So I don't want to have another ID, for example, in this span with the same words, same wording, same everything. So I don't want to have, by default, the IDs should be unique. And that will mean, okay, grab me that ID. That's why it's saying get element by ID, because it knows that it should have one ID in this document collection here, in this document, and that's why we're grabbing that one. Okay, now these three was very used in the past, but not much now. Why? Well, they're not replaced actually. Well, they're nowadays developers are using query selector and query selector all. So with the query selector, we can still select the elements here, right? By their tag names, same as their tag names. I'm just going to show you and say here query selector. Very good. And say H2 and it will select the H2, but it's not going to give me now as an HTML collection. It will give me as the entire document here. Sorry, the entire element here, right? So when I hover it, it's going to do the H2. Well, that's not the only power that the query selector can do. And the query selector is in singular and means it's going to return one instance. For example, if I have another class here, very good, like this. So we do have two H2 elements now inside this document, but it's still going to get the first one, because what the query selector does is saying, okay, go through the DOM and find me the first instance of H2. And this is the first instance. This is the second one. So how are we going to get the second one? Well, we can get the second one with a query selector all. And we can say query selector all is the keyword, save it. Now we have a node list. We don't have a collection, we have a node list. You don't have to worry about these terms. We're going to cover them later on. And same, I can access to the second one if I pass the index, right? I do have 2. It's saying node list 2. So I can get the first one with 0, the second one with index 1. Okay. Now that is pretty cool, but somebody will say, what's the difference between those then? Well, let me just show you something. With the query selector, you can select even the class names. So I know that I have 6 times this li here, right? And this li has the element class, right? So what I can do here, I'm just going to copy this. I'm not going to put any number because we don't have anything like that here, right? I don't want to confuse you, but I'm just going to say dot element. Save it. And now you see I have a node list with 7 elements. But somebody will say, okay, I do have 6 LIs here with the class element, right? But in the footer, I do also have another class element. That's why it's 7. So it's going to return the query selector all of the instances where this class is repeated. And the key point here is to understand that you need to use the dot. Well, if you want to use something like ID, then you can use the hash symbol. Hash my UL. Save it. Very good. Here it is. And if I go there, it will select the entire UL. Cool. This is so nice. Let's create something here. I'm just going to add. And I'm not going to give a class here. I'm going to say, actually, we can use the same class, but I'm going to change to a D here. Right? And there you go, that add there. Well, we can target that here as, what was the name? Add BTN, add button. Here it is, a span with that ID. Very good. So if I hover it, it will just select this add here. Nice. So now you know that you can do it with the power of the classes and the IDs. Very good. Now you can select by their name, by their tag name, and also by their class or IDs. Very good. And this is called attributes here. Nice. So what's the next one? Get and set attribute. Let's do this. Actually, I'm just gonna console log this one. I'm just gonna comment this one, right? And I'm gonna comment this one here because I don't want to mess up. Oops, I don't want to mess up here the structure that I do have. Right? It doesn't look nice. Very good. So get attribute and set attribute. So for example, if I want to get the attribute of this H2 class, and the attribute of the class is called title. So how I can do that? So first things first, I need to select the entire element, which is H2. Very good. And I'm going to use the query selector for that. Same as here. But look what is happening. I'm using the query selector all for the H2, for example, multiple times here. And that's not ideal. But let me just show you what I do, and then we will fix this problem. So when I select the document.querySelector all, or we can use just query selector, all right? Now, we're gonna select the first, this H2 instance, and I want to get the title, that attribute. So I will say get attribute, then here I need to specify the class. So that should give me back the title, because in class I do have that attribute title. So anything between the quotes will be considered as an attribute. Sorry, here it is. Very good. Now we have used document.querySelector H2 multiple times, and this is why we need to use the cache selectors, cache variables. Why we need to use cache variables? Well, caching is a very important thing, an important concept for you to understand. For example, I do have variable x equal to document.this. Oops, not that. Close it. Now the result of this, whatever it returns, it will be stored here, right? So I can do console.log x now, and that will return me the title. And that is super powerful because I can use now x multiple times without using this document.querySelector and looking through the DOM, for example, multiple times. And that's saving me memory, saving the time, saving browser to go through all of the hurdles, finding things for me, right? So that is why it is very essential for you to know that this caching is very important for us, right? Because the cache selectors will help us to decrease the time searching through the DOM and efficiency in the same time. Okay, that is pretty much it. Now we know how to get an attribute, but how do we set an attribute? Well, we can set an attribute, for example, for this here. So Play Nintendo, it's underlined, right? And I just don't want to be underlined, so I can set the attribute on this ally here. This is the ally document that I'm talking about. Oops, here, this one. So I can change this attribute here to something completely new, right? So what I can do now, I will use the query selector again, but I'm gonna say var checked equal to document.querySelector, and we need the first one. Otherwise, we need the first one here from this list. 0, first one. If we didn't need the first one, then we can use the query selector, right? So query selector all. I'm going to use the query selector all, and inside I'm going to say h2. So I select that. Sorry, li, not h2. I was confused. And I say the first one, then set attribute. Then on the class, I do want to set an attribute called no check. Save it here. And the Play Nintendo Switch is already being changed. Why do you think this has happened? Well, what I have done basically in simple words is I found this li document, li element, which is on the first position, is this one, and I changed this here, the classes, these are CSS classes, to something like this, no check. Doesn't matter if I do have this CSS class in my assets folder and the CSS, right? Maybe I do, maybe I don't, but that's not important. It will try finding here, but if it didn't find, then yeah, no big deal. So you want to see? If you click inspect, here it is. I've just added a new class for this li, for this first list element. And the class is no check, but is actually cannot be found here. And that's not a problem. We can create that class. For example, if I do no check, and let's say background color, let's say green here. Save it. Look what was happening. Now it found the class no check from my CSS document, and it applied this color. Why? Because through the DOM, I just change it. First I select this li document, then I set attribute, to this, and everything was inside was deleted and replaced it by no check, and no check was class found here. And that is pretty much it, how it's working. Okay, let's move on to something more interesting, and let's do the CSS styles now. How we can apply CSS styles on our, for example, these H2 elements. So, well, I already mentioned about this style property in the previous lecture, but I'm going to do it once more. So console.log, let me just first write it. So do it with me, document.querySelector. I'm going to select the H2. Then I'm going to apply the style.background color. Now I'm going to change the background color of this, my to-do list, into orange, red. Yeah, like that. Save it. And it should work, right? Do I have the correct number of here? Yeah, I do that. Yeah. Make sure that you have the correct number of brackets, because sometimes it can throw you an error. Okay, now, see, the color is already been changed. So if you do inspect and you go here, you will see that in H2 class, beside the class title, in H2 element actually, I have class title and I have style.background. And this is not the way we should do it. So this is a classical example of separation of concerns. And if you have encountered this term before, then you know what I'm trying to say. Now, separation of concerns means this. The DOM or whatever JavaScript file we do have, it's gonna be for the JavaScript action we take on the website, right? The style.css will be for the styles that we are using to style this HTML, and the index will be for the markup, right? That's pretty much for the structure of this document. So we don't want to add here like we did before, like we did in this case, right? We don't want to add the styles directly here, but I just want that style to come from this particular asset. Okay, so how I'm going to do that? Well, to do that, we need to use another one called class example, a class name. Why did I say class example? I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm going to say, before that, let me just console log this one because I really don't like what we did here. And the class name. So with the class name, what we can do, we can add another class inside here beside this one. So that class that we can add, we can actually style it here. Okay, so first let's style the class, and let's say my style, and so in CSS we specify the classes with dot my style, right? Very good. And make sure that you notice that we also, where it was, in the query selector we use dot class name, same as we did it here, right? That's why we can select classes. Okay, now what I'm going to do in my style, I'm going to say font size. I'm just going to increase the font size to 60 px. Then I'm going to say letter spacing of 3 px. Then text shadow will be 2 px. And color black. Very good. And color, let's put a color to this. Let's say rosy brown. Cool. Now this style is sitting here in the style.css, but it's never been used. Okay, now let's use it together with this. So var title style equal to document dot query selector. Let's select the h2, then add the class name that we just created here, my style. Just copy that one, make sure it's working, semicolon at the end, save it. Wow, there you go. Now you have the actually you have the title h2 with this rosy brown color with text shadow and increased font size. How cool is this? And here you can say that we add the my style class. Very good. And that comes to something very interesting now. So we can use, instead of class name, we can use class list. And on a class list, we have access to these 3 methods. And this is super powerful. So let's create this together. So first, console.log document.query selector. And I'm going to select the list element here. And I'm just going to say class list. Let's see what's inside the class list. All right, save it. And actually we need to, what's happening here? Inspect it. Here it is. Now I have the DOM token list of element and value element. Okay, where this element comes from? Well, that element comes from, I'm just gonna close this, from this actual class name. So let me just add something here, say, well, I need new class, save it. Here it is. I do have the element and I do have the new class there. So what I will try now is to create another class in our CSS style. And this class, I will say dot list class, and just copy some of these things, but not the font size. We don't need it. And yeah, just remove the font size and save it. Okay, now I'm gonna use this class that we just defined here with the class list. So as I told you, the class list has access to these 3 methods. So we can add class, we can remove class, and we can toggle. Okay, so first things first, I'm just gonna copy this one, and I'm gonna say dot add, and I'm going to add what? The class that we just created, but make sure that it's in quotes. List class. Very good. Save it. Now you see that, okay, what we have done, because we use the query selector, we access the first one and we change that first one, right? We just applied those styles directly from here. And if you go back here, inspect it, now you will see that you have the element, new class. And why is this not working? Okay, so we have the new class and the list class as well. Very good. By the way, we don't need this new class. Save it. So we added additional class here without deleting the previous one. And this is super powerful. This is why I like the class list more than the class name, because the class name just override the change the entire name. Okay, now we know about the add. Let's just copy this entire line here, put it down here, and let's say remove. Now, as I haven't touched save here, right? So be sure that you're just looking at this screen here. So I'm gonna save it. It goes back to normal. Why? Because the class that we just added, list class, was removed. So we added, but because the JavaScript compiler is going line by line, it went to this one first, right? It added that class and then went to this one and it removed that class. Simple as that. Very good. Now, let's play with the last one called toggle. And let's see what will happen. Make sure that you change this too, because you don't need them. And it's difficult for me because, oops, I'm using the screen like that, and I really don't like to use the screen like that. So make sure that you comment this one too. Now save it. Go back here, and it's been, and this class, it's already been applied, right? Save it here, put it there, save it once more. So that class is not there anymore, right? Save it once more, and that class will be applied again. So toggle means like a switch, turn it on and off. Very good. So now it's select or deselect. It's what we are using the toggle. It's always sometimes to select or deselect things, to turn on and off things, and that's why this toggle means. Toggle means this both, add and remove in the same time. Okay, now you know how the toggle will work. Very good. So toggle one will be adding, the other toggle will means removing that class, and so on, so on. Very good. Now let's focus on the other things that we need to do. So we have done this, and now we need these three to go. Okay, let's do these three, and we are done for today's lecture. So I'm just gonna copy each and every of them like this. I'm gonna put it down here, and make sure that you put a comment before that. Make sure that they're all commented out. Now, the inner HTML will put an HTML here, right? So for example, let's write P. So we don't have any other P tag here, right? So what will the inner HTML do? Okay, so let's say var. So let's create a variable called P. And let's select this document dot query selector, and let's select P. So that will give us this P element, right? Now, P.inner HTML will allow us to actually put an HTML inside this P tag, paragraph tag. So I'm gonna say strong here, Rick, and you need to close this one and say strong. Make sure you put semicolon in the end, save it. There you go. Now you do have this strong. So if I go inspect, then you have a P, and inside we have a strong tag. So now you know how to add an HTML. Very good. But what's the difference between this and this? Well, let's create another here. Let's create href. This is a link, by the way, and it will point to nowhere, right? So it's not visible here, but with the, let me just grab that one, and let's say link here. So first we need to grab, I don't have any other href there. So a.inner text, not HTML, it's a different. And why it's not working? Oh, add event listener, that's why. I wasn't just looking around there. So link dot inner text, and let's say this is awesome, and save it. Now there you go. So what happened is we created a link before, and now there is a text in that link. So that is how you can add text, and this is how you can add an HTML. Okay, what about the parent element? So I want to get the parent. Let me just give you a brief information. The body is the parent of all of this inside the body, right? So these are called children. Now this div here has its own children, and these are 1, 2, 3. So if you uncomment all of this, they will be also considered as children. So we have 5, right? Okay, these UL, an ordered list, has a 6 list items. Very good. Now let me just first grab this first one. So I'm gonna say var first list element, and I'm gonna say document dot query selector, and just say li. It will give me the first one. Very good. Now if I want to get the parent of that first element, so I just want to say console log, we'll say 1, and first list element dot parent element. Now look what will happen. Do it sure again. Sometimes this is messing up a little bit, sorry. Okay, not sources, come on. Very good. Now I do have the parent element of this list element is UL. Very good. So what if I want to access the parent of, so I've got the parent of this list element, which is this UL, but what if I want to get the parent of this UL? So that will be the body. Okay, so how are we gonna do that? So I'm just gonna comment this one here and say parent element again. Very good. And make sure that you put here number 2 in order to know what's happening. Here it is, the body. Now the body is the parent element of the unordered list. So we can just say here var body parent, and just make sure that you copy the entirety, cut it from there, semicolon, and just put that one there. It will just make the same result, but we're gonna use this one here. Now what are the children of the parent? So for the body we have 6 children. This is the first one, this is the second one, this is the third one, this is the fourth, this is the fifth, and the last one. But let's check this one out. So what can I do? I can just copy this one, make sure that it's number 3, and body out children, save it. Very good. Now I do have all of this as a collection. So that is all for this lecture. Make sure you do the exercises. It will give you more practice and more things to look into the internet, because sometimes you can find very good information there, and you can expand your knowledge, because it's not possible to cover everything, right? But we covered the main thing. Now you do the exercise, and I will see you in the next one. Okay.